Greetings to you. This is Germane again. As you know, we're presenting this series for you on the Galactic Heritage Cards, and we recommend that you watch the videos from the beginning in order to understand the context of what we've been sharing. So the last set of cards that we worked on was Pleiadian, 4th density, and now we're going to move to the cards for Sirius of the 3rd era, which on the card is referenced as future time stream. So in the last section, when we were talking about the Pleiades, and we were talking about what they healed within themselves regarding their internal polarization, and we were talking about how they did a lot of inner work to, in a sense, round up and embrace and recognize all those different parts of themselves that had previously been rejected or ignored. Now we pick up here with the Sirian 4th density consciousness with a very similar theme. You could say in some ways that the Sirians' 4th density and the Pleiadians' 4th density are almost like cousins, in the sense that they went through their evolutionary process as a species very similarly in almost contemporary time to each other. So very often they were dealing with the same issues. And this is one of the reasons why in the ancient days they often worked together, because there was a compatibility with them. So we're going to look then at the first card here. Again, it is Sirian 3rd era, referenced as future time stream. We start with card number 92 with the theme calling our parts home. We've heard from many people that this is one of their favorite cards for some reason. And hopefully you can feel the energy of this card, because as we were saying in the previous video, that when you get to this point of evolution as a species, it becomes necessary to no longer fragment internally and to, in a sense, call your parts home. The parts that have been ignored, the parts that have been denied, the parts even that have been hated. For the Sirians, this is one of the keys to their evolution. Now, we've already talked about Sirian 2nd era in previous videos, and you can reference that if you wish. But they too did go through their own wounds and their own stuff on their way to awakening. But for them, what really was the key to accelerating their evolution, it had to do with the energy of this card, calling the parts home. Now, if you have gotten that card in a reading, it is quite self-explanatory, but it may be a recognition for you that you've been doing this work. It may be an invitation for you to do the work even more, and it may be kind of a reminder of something that needs to be done by you if there's been a specific aspect of your life or an aspect of you that you have been refusing to look at. So you really have to look at the different circumstances of your life and the different other cards that might be in the reading, but it is a really, really powerful card that shows you the potential of your consciousness if you allow yourself to do the deep inner work, much like your extraterrestrial forefathers before you. So imagine then that you get to a point where, as a 4th density species, that you have healed a lot of the polarity within you, and now you don't need to create conflict. We were talking about this in the last video. You don't have to create conflict in order to see reflections of yourself so you can grow. Instead, growth is much more natural and much more organic and doesn't necessarily come through pain. So let's say you've gotten to that point then where you are settled inside. And let's say, hypothetically then, that you come across a person who is in pain. Now, right now, the human tendency when coming across someone who's in pain is either to look away, to avoid it, to pretend you never saw it, or to jump in and try to fix it for the person, maybe even without invitation. Now, the next card kind of addresses that tendency that humanoids have had, usually in a second era level of consciousness, which is where humans are right now. So the next card then, again, Sirius, third era, which is future time stream, is number 93, assistance without interference. So in the early days, second era and first era Sirian, they were the saviors, let's say. They were the ones that wanted to go in on the white horse, so to speak, and fix it for everyone else. And pretty soon they realized not only does that entangle you karmically, but it also distracts you from dealing with your own stuff. So for them, the Sirians learned an extremely valuable lesson that once they healed themselves inside, when they encountered another person in pain, they didn't have to rescue them, nor did they have to, in self-preservation, look away. Instead, those two opposites, so to speak, came together and created a deep level of compassion. True compassion, not mental compassion. There is a difference. Mental compassion is the mentally, let's say, identifying with someone's pain, but not ever really feeling it. Compassion is when that identification moves to the heart. So, through all of the inner work that the Sirians did, where they then began to neutralize their own polarized charges within them, and came to a place, as talked about in the Pleiadian series before this, they came to that place of, let's say, harmonized duality within themselves. Then they could encounter someone in pain and not feel the need to rush in and save, nor feel the need to look away, but to, in a sense, sit with the person in compassion and give the person the greatest gift they could give, which is their conscious presence, their conscious witnessing of their pain. So because this was one of the key issues for the Sirians, when they resolved it, they were then seen as masters, if you will, emotional masters, because they learned how to sit with that compassion and witness the experience without the need for changing the experience in any way. So if you have gotten this assistance without interference card in your reading, it's interesting, we've seen people who've reacted to when they get this card, and very often the person reacts with great knowingness that perhaps their issue is that they try to rush in and save. That's usually the most common issue. So the message then in your reading might be that. It might be that you need to step back from a situation in order to let it play out. It might also be to allow yourself not to look away and ignore it, but to somehow develop the middle point, which is the coming together of those two states, which is that witnessing, compassionate presence that we were talking about, which in and of itself is extremely healing. So you have to look at your circumstances and the other cards to recognize exactly what the message is, but that is a very significant message, because humans and Sirians often are very close emotionally, in the sense that you have a lot of similar emotional patterns. So this issue that the Sirians worked with and healed themselves of, this is a great model for humans to also do the same. That leads us then to the next card. Again, Sirius Third Era, Future Time Stream, card number 94. The theme is mental transformation. Okay, what do we mean by that? Well, you have to look at how the Sirian lineage is sourced back to Vega. And as you remember from many of the other sessions, that Vega was very mind-oriented. And many of their branches, lineage branches, like the Zetas as an example, had a challenge with focusing on the mental body. So when the Sirians were a young species, they recognized their tendency to do that. And from the beginning, they tried, in a sense, to resist the temptation to do that, and instead to try in whatever way they could to balance their mentality with their emotionality. So they did tend to skew more mental, but not in the ways of the Zetas or the Vegans. They had a little bit more emotionality that they were balancing with their mentality. So that being said, we go back to this idea then of the last card and having to jump in and save. When you get to a point inside yourself where, what we were talking about again in the previous Pleiadian video, you get to the point where the polarized charges within you are neutralized, and you go from polarized disharmony to harmonized duality, then because you're not viewing reality from a polarized charge, your mental body literally changes. So in lesser evolved civilizations, especially in third density, the mental body runs the show, in the sense that, you know, the idea of when you have a foreign language translator. Often words don't translate exactly from one language to another, so you have somebody called an interpreter who listens to one language, processes it, and then speaks it in another language. It's not exact, and it's often tinted in a way that's stronger toward the native language, so to speak. All right? So in third density reality, the mental body, your mental bodies, act like interpreters of reality. So you never really, to some degree, get the exact experience, because the mental body is narrating and interpreting the experience according to the polarized charges within the consciousness. So this is why we say then that when you neutralize those internal polarized charges, the mental body shifts, because the mental body no longer becomes an interpreter of reality, which means then the mental body loses a tremendous amount of its power to shape the way you perceive reality. So that is what card number 94 is referring to. is that as the Sirians made this shift, their mental bodies shifted to no longer being interpreters of reality, but let's just say organizers of reality, or the mental body became, let's say, a tool to navigate reality, but was never any longer the one who dictated the perception of reality. This is a huge shift. Right now on your world, because you're at this nexus point of letting go of third density and moving into fourth density, humans right now are caught in the net of mental body interpretation. You see this, or shall we say mental body polarized interpretation. You see this with politics as an example, where everyone believes they've intellectually thought out their side and their side is right. But in reality, it is just the mental body interpreting the polarized charge. That's all it is. When that polarized charge is removed, mental body shifts and your view of reality absolutely, totally changes. And of course, we don't have to remind you that when your view of reality changes, reality thus follows suit. That is the gateway, let's say, into fourth density harmonized duality, is when the mental body makes this change. So here we have it showing itself in the awakening process of your Sirian forefathers. This was a key. So if you have gotten this card, the mental transformation card, in your reading, again, it can have to do with many different things, but it could be an invitation for you to make a leap and to no longer allow your mental body to be the interpreter of reality. We cannot stress to you how huge that is, how huge it is for your awakening process. So if you've gotten the card, look in the rest of your reading, look in your life and see where perhaps there might be some polarized charges that need to be addressed so that you can experience that mental body shift. Now again, it's not like a light switch. It comes in layers, but one step at a time, so that you begin to experience that mental body shift away from interpretation, so that your entire reality begins to change. And finally, we have here, again, we are Sirian Third Era Future Time Stream, number 95, the card with the theme called Way Showing. Now this is referring to, of course, how the Sirians in the ancient past, they were your teachers as a new human species, but in the ancient past, they were your teachers kind of based on that desire to interfere, or the desire to fix, or the desire to change something. But once the Sirians made that shift to non-dual harmony, so to speak, then their way showing, or their role as a teacher, also shifted. The way showing has more to do with the idea of teaching by example, or living as a role model, more so than it does having to do with being an outright teacher. So if this card has come up in your reading, then it could be telling you, now this is not an either-or situation, it could be many things, but one is that you potentially potentially have that ability to be a way shower, which is coming from a non-dual place, or we should say a non-polarized place, not polarized within the mental body. So it's more of a role model kind of idea, living by example, that you have that potential. But also, this is another one of those cards that very often refers to a Sirian consciousness, a future Sirian consciousness. It could be a future Sirian self of yours that is acting as a way shower for you right now within your evolution. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to have a direct open contact relationship, so to speak. Sometimes it's an energetic exchange, and the energetic exchange is enough of a modeling even if you're not fully consciously aware of it. So look to your other cards, look to what's happening in your life to really understand why that card is showing up. But we remind you that it has to do with no longer the dynamic of the ancient Sirians, which is to teach and to change and to fix, but it's more to model, because they are at that place in their consciousness of very harmonized energy that no longer needs to play out that old pattern of fixing or avoiding, so to speak. All right, so that is the third era Sirian energy for today. We're coming very soon to the end of the deck. We're in the 90s now of 108 cards. So the energy of the evolution of your galactic family is going to continue to accelerate until we get to the end. So thank you for your attention, and for now, we wish you much love.